The White People by Arthur Machen. Sorcery and sanctity, said Ambrose. These are the only realities. Each is an ecstasy, a withdrawal from the common life. Cotgrave listened, interested. He had been brought by a friend to this mouldering house in a northern suburb, through an old garden to the room where Ambrose the recluse dozed and dreamed over his books. Yes, he went on, magic is justified of her children. There are many who eat dry crusts and drink water with a joy infinitely sharper than anything within the experience of the practical epicure. You're speaking of the saints? Yes, and of the sinners too. I think you are falling into the general error of confining the spiritual world to the supremely good. But the supremely wicked necessarily have their portion in it. I have no doubt but that many of the very highest among the saints have never done a good action. And on the other hand, there have been those who have sounded the very depths of sin, who in all their lives have never done an ill deed. The murderer murders not from positive qualities, but from negative ones. He lacks something which non-murderers possess. Evil, of course, is wholly positive, only it is on the wrong side. You may believe me that sin, in its proper sense, is very rare. You think, then, that we do not understand the real nature of evil? Cotgrave broke in. No, I don't think we do. We overestimate it and we underestimate it. We've quite forgotten the awfulness of real sin. And what is sin? Said Cotgrave. I think I must reply to your question by another. What would your feelings be if your cat or your dog began to talk to you? You would be overwhelmed with horror, I'm sure of it. And if the pebble you noticed at night had shot out stony blossoms in the morning, well, these examples may give you some notion of what sin really is. There is something profoundly unnatural about sin. Is that what you mean? Exactly. Holiness requires almost as great an effort, but holiness works on lines that were natural once. It is an effort to recover the ecstasy that was before the fall. But sin is an effort to gain the ecstasy and the knowledge that pertain alone to angels. And in making this effort, man becomes a demon. Evil is unnatural in a much deeper sense than good. The saint endeavours to recover a gift which he has lost. The sinner tries to obtain something that was never his. In brief, he repeats the fall. But you're a Catholic, said Cotgrave. I am. Well, then how about those texts which seem to reckon as sin that which you would set down as a mere trivial dereliction? Consider. Can you imagine that a false statement which saves an innocent man's life is a sin? No. Very good, then. It is not the mere liar who is excluded by these words. It is, above all, the sorcerers who use the failings incidental to material life as instruments to obtain their infinitely wicked ends. Our higher senses are so blunted, we are so drenched with materialism, that we should probably fail to recognize real wickedness if we encountered it. With most of us, convention, civilization, and education have blinded and deafened and obscured the natural reason. I'm trying to get hold of it all, said Cotgrave. Now, from what you say, I gather that true evil differs generically from that which we call evil. Certainly, because true evil has nothing to do with social life or social laws, or if it has, only incidentally and accidentally. It is a lonely passion of the soul, or a passion of the lonely soul, whichever you like. Your psychology is very strange to me, said Cotgrave, but I confess I like it. In a word, what is sin? You've given me an abstract definition, but I should like a concrete example. I told you it was very rare, said Ambrose. If you like, I can show you something that bears on the very curious subject we have been discussing. Ambrose took a candle and went to a dim corner of the room, drew out a parcel, and came back to the window where they had been sitting. He undid a wrapping of paper and produced a green pocket-book. Don't leave it lying about. It is one of the choicer pieces in my collection, and I should be very sorry if it were lost. I knew the girl who wrote this. When you read it, you will see how it illustrates the talk we have had tonight. There was a broad red band in the east as Cotgrave turned to go, and from the high ground where he stood, he saw that awful spectacle of London in a dream. The book looked as if it had been bought on a visit to London, some 70 or 80 years ago. It looked small, but the paper was fine, and there were many leaves closely covered with minute, painfully formed characters.
I found this book in a drawer in the old bureau that stands on the landing. I wanted a book like this to write in. It is full of secrets. I have a great many other books of secrets, hidden in a safe place. And I am going to write here many of the old secrets and some new ones. But there are some I shall not put down at all. I must not write down the real names of the days and months which I found out a year ago, nor the way to make the Aklo letters or the Kayan language. There are some things that I call the secrets of the secrets of the secrets that I dare not think of unless I'm quite alone. And then I shut my eyes and whisper the word, and the Alala comes. I may write something of these things, but not the way to do them. A wonderful thing happened when I was 5. My nurse was carrying me on her shoulder. We came to a path through a wood, and a tall man went with us. We came to a place where there was a deep pool. Nurse put me down under a tree and said, "She can't get to the pond now." So they left me there, and out of the water and out of the wood came 2 wonderful white people, and they began to play and dance and sing. They were a kind of creamy white, like the old ivory figure in the drawing-room. They played together and danced round and round the pool, and they sang a song till I fell asleep. Nurse woke me up when she came back, and she was looking something like the white lady had looked. So I told her all about it, and asked her why she looked like that. At first she cried, and then she looked very frightened. She said I had been dreaming, but I knew I hadn't. Then she made me promise not to say a word about it to anybody, and if I did, I should be thrown into the black pit. I was not frightened at all, though Nurse was, and I never forgot about it. I was 13, nearly 14, when I had a very singular adventure. So strange that the day on which it happened is always called the White Day. My mother had been dead for more than a year, and in the morning I had lessons, but they let me go out for walks in the afternoon. And this afternoon I walked a new way. It was a long, long way, and it seemed as if I was going on forever and ever. Then I found that I was climbing, and I went up and up until I came out, just under the top of a bare place. I looked out and saw the country. There were hundreds and hundreds of dreadful rocks. Some were like horrid, grinning men. I went on among them, though they frightened me, and my heart was full of wicked songs that they put into it. I went on, till at last I liked the rocks, and they didn't frighten me any more. I sang the songs I thought of, songs full of words that must not be spoken or written down, There was a little stream running down a valley. I drank the water and it tasted like wine. I couldn't drink enough, so I lay down and sucked the water up with my lips. I pretended there was a nymph who lived in the water and was kissing me. I could see nothing all around but the grey rocks. They seemed as if they had been arranged into patterns and shapes. It looked, from where I was standing, something like two great figures of people lying on the grass. It was so strange and solemn and lonely, like a hollow temple of dead heathen gods. I went on, and at last I found a certain wood. I found it in a very curious manner, by seeing some small animal run into a dark passage. I went after it, and came to an open place, and there I saw the most wonderful sight I have ever seen. But it was only for a minute, as I ran away directly. I was hot all over and trembling, and my heart was beating. Strange cries came from me. I ran and ran. I was glad that a great white moon came up from over a round hill and showed me the way. At last I got home again. My father was busy in his study, and the servants had not told about my not coming home. I went to bed and lay awake all through the night thinking of what I had seen. It reminded me of the tales my nurse had told me when I was little. It was the same nurse that took me into the wood where I saw the beautiful white people. I remembered how she had told me a story one winter night in the nursery. It was about a young man who once upon a time went hunting with his hounds, and they hunted all day till the sun sank. The young man was angry because he couldn't find anything, and he was going to turn back when he saw a beautiful white stag. He cheered to his hounds, but they would not follow, and he cheered to his horse, but it shivered and stood stock still. So the young man jumped off the horse and began to follow the white stag all alone. They went through the enormous woods, and they swam across rivers, and they waded through black marshes where the ground bubbled, and the stag fled away down into rocky, narrow valleys, and the man went after it. At last the sun rose, and the young man found he was in a country that he had never seen before. It was a beautiful valley with a bright stream running through it, and a great big round hill in the middle. But just as the man stretched out his hand to catch the stag, it vanished into the earth. The man began to cry. He was so sorry that he had lost it after all his long hunting. But as he was crying, he saw there was a door in the hill, just in front of him, and he went in. It was quite dark, but all of a sudden it got light, and there was a beautiful fountain, and by the fountain a lovely lady was sitting, who was the queen of the fairies, and she told the man that she had changed herself into a stag to bring him there because she loved him so much. Then she brought out a great gold cup and offered him to drink, and the more he drank, the more he longed to drink, because the wine was enchanted. So he kissed the lovely lady, and she became his wife. He stayed all that day and all that night in the hill where she lived. And when he woke, he found he was lying on the ground, close to where he had seen the stag first. His horse was there, and his hounds were there waiting. And he looked up, and the sun sank behind the mountain. He went home and lived a long time, but he would never kiss any other lady because he had kissed the queen of the fairies, and he would not drink common wine any more because he had drunk enchanted wine. I was afraid. Perhaps I had done something dreadful. I did a charm and touched my eyes and lips and hair in a peculiar manner, and said the old words from the fairy language, so I might be sure I had not been carried away. Sometimes nurse told me tales that she had heard from her great-grandmother, who was very old and lived in a cottage on the mountain all alone. Most of these tales were about a hill where people used to meet at night long ago, and they used to play all sorts of strange games and do queer things. They made images and worshipped them, and Nurse showed me how the images were made one day when we were out for a walk, and we passed by a place where there was a lot of wet clay. She asked me if I would promise never to tell a living soul about it, and if I did, I was to be thrown into the black pit. So we sat down, and the nurse took the clay and began to knead it with her hands and do queer things with it. And then she stood up and sat down and walked round the clay in a peculiar manner. And all that time she was softly singing a sort of rhyme, and her face got very red. Then she began to shape the clay into a doll, but not like the dolls I have at home. She made the queerest doll I had ever seen, all out of the wet clay, and hid it under a bush to get dry and hard. And all that time she was making it, she was singing these rhymes to herself, and her face got redder and redder. So we left the doll there, hidden away in the bushes where nobody would ever find it. A few days later, we went the same walk, and when we came to that dark part of the lane where the break runs down to the bank, Nurse made me promise all over again. So she did all sorts of queer things with the little clay man, and I noticed she was streaming with perspiration, and then she told me to pay my respects. And I did everything she did because I liked her, and it was such an odd game. And she said that if one loved very much, the clay man was very good if one did certain things with it, and if one hated very much, it was just as good, only one had to do different things. And we played with it a very long time, and pretended all sorts of things. Nurse said her great-grandmother had told her about these images, but what we did was no harm at all, only a game. But she told me one story that frightened me very much. She told me of the queen of the people who danced on the hill on the summer nights. She knew more of the secrets than anyone else. She knew how to destroy young men, how to put a curse on people, and other things I do not understand. Her real name was Lady Evelyn, but the dancing people called her Cassap. She was whiter than any of them and taller. She could sing songs that none of the others could sing, and when she sang, they all fell down and worshipped her. These were all the things I was thinking about in those days after the strange walk, when I thought I had seen a great secret. Then one day I became sure that all that Nurse had said was quite true. I was all alone when I found it out. I trembled with joy and terror. When I came to the place where the elder was, I covered up my face with my hands and lay down flat on the grass. I stayed there for 2 hours without moving, whispering to myself delicious, terrible things, and saying some words over and over again. It was all true and wonderful, and when I remembered the story, I knew and thought of what I had really seen. I got hot, I got cold, and the air seemed full of scent and flowers and singing. I wanted to make a little clay man, like the one Nurse had made so long ago. I brought the wet clay and did everything that she had done, only I made a much finer image than the one she had made, and when it was finished I did everything that I could imagine and much more than she did, because it was the likeness of something far better. And a few days later, when I had done my lessons early, I went for the second time into a strange country. I went into the place where there are the hollows and the 2 beautiful mounds and all the strange shapes. This time I made out the figures quite plainly as it was lighter, and I had remembered the story I had quite forgotten before, and in the story the 2 figures are called Adam and Eve, and only those who know the story understand what they mean. Then I went on until I came to the secret wood. When I had gone about halfway, I stopped and bound a handkerchief tightly round my eyes. Then I began to go on, step by step, very slowly, my heart beating faster and faster, and something rose in my throat that made me want to cry out, but I shut my lips and went on. Boughs caught in my hair as I went, and great thorns tore at me, but I went on to the end of the path. Then I stopped and held out my hands and bowed, and I went round the first time, feeling with my hands, and there was nothing. I went round the second time, feeling with my hands, and there was nothing. Then I went round the third time, feeling with my hands, and the story was all true. And I wished that the years were gone by and that I had not so long a time to wait before I was happy for ever and ever. Nurse must have been a prophet like those we read of in the Bible. Everything that she said began to come true. In the secret place I went to the brimming well, and when I looked in, I knew who the white lady was that I had seen in the woods so long ago. And I trembled all over, because that told me other things. Then I remembered how some time after I had seen the white people in the wood, Nurse asked me more about them, and I told her and she listened. At last she said, "You will see her again." So I understood what had happened and what was to happen, and I understood about the nymphs, how I might meet them in all kinds of places, and they would always help me, and I must always look for them, and find them in all sorts of strange shapes and appearances, and without the nymphs I could never have found the secret, and without them none of the other things could happen. There were two kinds, the bright and the dark, and both were very lovely and very wonderful. Nurse had shown me how to call them, and I tried, but I did not know what she meant, and so I thought it was all nonsense. But I tried again, and the dark nymph Alana came, and she turned the pool of water into a pool of fire.
That's a very queer story, said Cotgrave, handing back the green book to the recluse Ambrose. I see the drift of a good deal, but there are many things that I do not grasp at all. What does she mean by nymphs? Well, I think there are references throughout the manuscript to certain processes which have been handed down by tradition from age to age. Some of these processes are just beginning to come within the purview of science, which has arrived at them, or rather at the steps which lead to them, by quite different paths. I've interpreted the reference to nymphs as a reference to one of these processes. I'm afraid you have neglected the study of alchemy. It is a pity, for the symbolism is very beautiful. Moreover, if you were acquainted with certain books on the subject, I could recall to your mind phrases which might explain a good deal in the manuscript that you have been reading. Yes, but I want to know whether you seriously think that there is any foundation of fact beneath these fancies. I can only say that it is no doubt better for the great mass of people to dismiss it all as a dream. But my belief, that goes the other way. I have known cases in which men have stumbled quite by accident on certain of these processes, and have been astonished by wholly unexpected results. Powerful and sovereign medicines, which are, of necessity, virulent poisons also, are kept in a locked cabinet. The child may find the key by chance and drink herself dead, but in most cases the search is educational, and the phials contain precious elixirs for him who has patiently fashioned the key for himself. You see how the manuscript illustrates the talk we had last week? Is this girl still alive? No. I was one of those who found her in the place that she described with so much dread, lying on the ground before the image. And what was this statue? Well, it was of Roman workmanship, of a stone that with the centuries had not blackened, but had become white and luminous. The thicket had grown up about it and concealed it. In the Middle Ages, the followers of a very old tradition had known how to use it for their own purposes. You will have noted that those to whom a sight of that shining whiteness had been vouchsafed by chance, or rather perhaps by apparent chance, were required to blindfold themselves on their second approach. That is very significant. And is it there still? I sent for tools, and we hammered it to dust and fragments. The persistence of tradition never surprises me, Ambrose went on after a pause. I could name many an English parish where such traditions as that girl had listened to in her childhood are still existent in occult but unabated vigour. No, for me, it is the story, not the sequel, which is strange and awful. For I have always believed that wonder is of the soul.